Hello and welcome to this Facebook Live. We are here today with Paul from George House Trust and Agatha, who's one of our positive speakers for the George House Trust. If I could go through some introductory slides first, and we can then hear from our guest speakers. Live stream guidelines. Be accepting, everyone is welcome. Respect boundaries. Don't make any comments that might make someone uncomfortable. Don't be rude. Don't flood the chat. Don't self-promote. Keep it clean. Our session overview. I will talk briefly about Healthwatch Bury, and we will then move on to Paul from the George House Trust, followed by the talk about positive speakers from Agatha, and the question and answer session that will be hosted by Steph. Healthwatch is your health and social care champion. We make sure that the decision makers hear your voice and use your feedback to improve local health and care services. We listen to your experiences of using health and social care services and share them with those who have the power to make change happen. And we can also provide you with information and advice. We can support you by signposting you to local online support groups or local befriending groups. We can also provide information and advice about you or your family members' healthcare, and by listening to your experiences of using health and care services in Bury. And these are our contact details if you would like to get in touch. I will now stop sharing my screen and pass over to Paul.
Thanks very much, Marie. So my name is Paul Fairweather. I work for the George House Trust, which is the main HIV charity in the Northwest and Greater Manchester, and I manage our Positive Speakers project. I'm going to talk a little bit about the work the George House Trust does and a little bit about myself, and then I'll hand over to Agatha, who's one of our positive speakers. She'll talk in more detail about her experiences of living with HIV. I've been involved in working around HIV since the early 1980s, since the very earliest days of the epidemic. And in 1985, I was one of a group of 6 gay men who set up Manchester AIDS Line, that's now the George House Trust. And in those very early days, there was a huge amount of fear and ignorance and prejudice around HIV. We didn't know what caused it initially. Then for a long time, there was no treatment. So actually people went on to develop AIDS and died. And now it's only with the advent and combination therapy that now the treatment is very effective. HIV has become a long-term medical condition. I was diagnosed in 2000, so I've been living with HIV for 22 years. When I was first diagnosed, I used to take about 12 tablets a day, some at night, some in the evening, some with food, some without food. I now take 1 tablet a day. I see my consultant every 6 months, and my health is completely fine, basically. So there's been a huge change in terms of treatments, but there's still some stigma and prejudice and ignorance around people living with HIV, which is one of the key things we want to address in our presentation. George House Trust provides a lot of support for people who are newly diagnosed. When you first find out you've got HIV, it can be a big shock. So we provide a lot of one-to-one support. We provide a group for newly diagnosed people that not only looks at the medical issues, but also the social issues. It looks at issues about who do you tell in terms of telling your partners, friends, family, work colleagues. We also have some specific support groups for people. We have a group for young people who were born with HIV. We have a women's group, an African group. We now have an African men's group, a group for gay men, and we can provide a lot of support in that. We have a peer mentoring project, which is people living with HIV supporting other people. We have a volunteer counselling service. Many of the people we support are refugees and asylum seekers, so we have a welfare fund, we have a food bank. We do a lot of work in terms of supporting people who have come to this country, sometimes because of their HIV status, sometimes because they're just fleeing persecution. And we also do a lot of work in terms of challenging stigma and discrimination. The Positive Speakers Project, which I manage, I work with a great group of volunteers who are all living with HIV and who are very happy to talk about their experiences. We've had some funding. We actually run training in schools. We've done a lot of work with a number of schools in Manchester, where we go into a whole year group. So for example, often year 10. So we go in and run sessions for the whole year group. And we do a bit of a presentation. We talk about HIV and the difference between HIV and AIDS. People get very confused. I mean, HIV is the virus, and I've been living with HIV for 22 years. But if I stop taking my medication, the virus would actually increase and I would eventually become very ill. So we talk about the difference between HIV and AIDS. We also talk about transmission, about how you can catch HIV and how you can't. HIV is a really difficult virus to catch. It dies really, really quickly outside the body. So we talk about the myths and stereotypes of contracting HIV. And then we also show a short video, which is young people living with HIV, talking about their experiences. But we've also had some fun. We've done some work with GP staff across the whole of Greater Manchester. And again, I think it's important that GPs and all the staff, not just the doctors, but the nurses, reception staff, the admin staff, have a chance to find out more about HIV. So we run sessions for those, and also for wider health and social care professionals across Greater Manchester. So we've done a lot of work in talking to all sorts of different groups. And I think for us, one of the key messages we get across is the U equals U message, which is undetectable equals untransmittable, because there's been a lot of research done recently, and it's now been shown beyond any reasonable doubt that if you have an undetectable viral load, which means that there's a tiny amount of the virus in your body, that you can't transmit it to anybody. So when I was first diagnosed, I had my viral load, which is how much of the virus in my body, was 750,000, so huge amounts of the virus in the body, which meant I was really infectious. It's now under 50, so there's a tiny, tiny amount of the virus still left in my body, but that means that I cannot transmit it to anybody. So for those of us living with HIV, that's really significant. So it's called U equals U, which is undetectable equals untransmittable. So in terms of contracting HIV, I'm the safest person you can meet. You might meet someone who says they're HIV negative, but they've never had an HIV test. So it's, so again, you might meet someone who said they had a test, but it might have been 6 months or a year ago. So we're also really keen to encourage people to get tested. It's now very simple to get a test. You can do it online. You can do it through the sexual health clinics. And again, these days, if you're actually HIV positive, you'll be started on treatment straight away. And the aim is to make everybody undetectable. So in Greater Manchester, Andy Burnham, who's the Mayor of Greater Manchester, has made a very public commitment to ending all new cases of HIV within a generation. So we're really keen to encourage people to get tested. Greater Manchester has one of the highest rates of HIV infection in the country, and there's still a small number of late diagnoses where people are not diagnosed in time, and they go on to develop HIV and they're not treated and they die. And again, that tends to be older people. The recent information shows that 50% of new diagnoses are among heterosexual people. There's still a bit of a myth it only affects gay men. That's absolutely not the case. And increasingly there's older heterosexual people are becoming infected. And that's partly because GPs are making assumptions about who'll be at risk or who's not really. So I'll also talk a bit about PrEP, which is used to prevent people who might be at risk of HIV. That's now available on the NHS across the UK. And again, that's a very effective way of actually reducing transmission. So I think we're clear that the combination of U equals U and PrEP means it's really possible to actually eliminate all new cases of HIV. So whilst there's not a cure, there's not a vaccine, it's very possible that people can actually, we won't see, it will disappear as a disease. So one of the key things that we do is challenge that stigma and discrimination. We're covered by equality legislation. So actually it's illegal to dismiss us because of our status or to deny us services, which doesn't mean discrimination doesn't happen, but we're covered by that. But often in these days, the medical treatments have improved enormously. but it's still the stigma and the self-stigma and the isolation that can be really damaging. So if you come across anyone who is diagnosed, I think as well as having the medical treatment, it's really important they're referred to organisations like the George House Trust, which can provide a lot of support. I'll stop there and I'll hand over to Agatha, and she's going to talk in a bit more detail about her personal experience of living with HIV, and then we're both very happy to answer any questions.
Hello, thank you so much, Paul, and thank you so much, everyone. My name is Agatha, and I'm a woman living with HIV. I have been living with it for 13 years. I decided to do positive speaking because of the stigma around HIV and also the reasons behind that stigma. So me as the person living with it, I have been a victim of it. And I thought, you know what, if we don't teach people what HIV is, how it gets transmitted, then nobody is going to know. And if they don't know, the stigma will not end. So it's really hard and tough, but then we have to do it because we all have. A lot of people they hear they were sleeping around, but that's not the case. HIV is transmitted in different ways. I've met people who got it from rescuing somebody from drugs, and the needle just got into them, then the virus was transmitted. I've met people who were born with it. I have met people who were raped. But the stigma is all the same. We all suffer the same stigma. We've all faced discrimination in all types, which is not fair because no one chooses to be HIV positive. So I moved in, I put myself there to teach people about HIV. So how did I got it? I'm from Malawi, and I lost my parents when I was young. I lived with my uncle, who started sexually abusing me, started raping me. And I couldn't tell anyone because he threatened me that if I do tell anyone, he's going to strangle me, burn me, and nobody's going to find my body. So I was really scared. I was 12 years old then. So this happened for so many years until when I was 15 years old, I decided to tell my auntie because I was done with it now. I couldn't take it anymore. So I told my auntie and she didn't believe me. After everything your uncle has done to you, after everything he has taken you from zero to nothing, from nothing, you're here now. And this is how you're paying him back. So I was told to apologize. They invited a lot of elder people for me to apologize and say sorry to my uncle. So this was a little child seeking support from a grown woman, but I didn't get it. Instead, I was put even more under stress. So I was scared now. So I had two thoughts in me, either to leave or to just die. So in the middle of the night that day, I decided to leave. Where I was going, I didn't really mind because I wasn't scared anymore. I thought the worst had already been done to me, that I wasn't scared of anything. So I went to the capital city of Malawi, Lilongwe Bus Depot. Those of you that have been to Africa, you know the setting is really different. You have street kids everywhere. So I became part of that. I became a street child for 2 days. On the third day, there was a couple that was coming from a different city, coming to the city I was living in, and they were looking for directions. So obviously I've been to school and they were speaking English. There was a white guy and a black woman. So one of the street kids called me to come and give these people direction in English. So they were surprised that a street child could speak English and they were interested. So they said, okay, you can follow us. Show us where we are going. So I took them and they finished their meeting and then we went to the hotel they were living in. Now I had to sit down with them and tell them everything that I was going through. Luckily, they had an orphanage. They were coming to the city I was in because there was the Ministry of Education. So they went to discuss something regarding the opening a school in their orphanage. So they offered me if they could take me to the orphanage, and there we go. I jumped on it and I went to the orphanage. I stayed with them and I was so creative. I discovered that in the community where the orphanage was, there wasn't any role models. So young people from the age of 13, 14, 15, some of them are pregnant, some of them are getting into early marriages, because that's how it is. They don't have anyone who has gone through past that stage without a child or without being married. So I decided to start like projects, acting, and also writing. So every Fridays, the children will come from school to display their writing on the board, and everyone was really excited to showcase their work. And also we started an acting club, and it was really good because a lot of people that we used to have in the orphanage, they were from here. So we were acting in English so they could understand. And the project really was going on well, and a lot of people started getting encouraged. Then there was a time local journalists came to the orphanage, and the owner of the orphanage now started showing off the work we do, the writings we do. And they were so interested in that. So they said, okay, she needs to go to a journalism school, because everything I was doing right, but I had no idea what it was. I would write an article and they were asking me, what is this? I'm like, I don't know. So they were really interested, and they said she just needs to be in school to be trained so she can know what she's doing. And then I was sent to a journalism school. I graduated with a degree, and at my graduation, unfortunately, we didn't have social media back in the day, so I didn't have pictures of my graduation. But it was amazing because about 5,000 children came to the graduation. It was so amazing and inspiring. So since then, a lot of children from the orphanage started getting graduation because they wanted to be in that gown, they wanted to be on that stage, and they started doing well. At the moment, they have doctors, they have few doctors, they have midwives, they have a lawyer who graduated after me, which is amazing. And then jobs were hard to find, so I was just moving from one place to the other, looking for opportunities, searching for jobs, until I got a job with the Malawi Electoral Commission as a reporter. I worked for 6 months. Then a group of Scottish directors came to Malawi to look for actors to do a play about Madonna, when Madonna was adopting the second child, Messi. So we did a play about Messi, Madonna, and the play took us to Scotland, where we came to act. Now, when I was in Malawi, I was always unwell. I had a thought that I could be HIV positive, but I was a child. I didn't want to accept that fact. But then at the same time, when I was delaying to go and get tested, my immunity was being suppressed, which means the HIV was now damaging my body, it was damaging my immune system. So I came to UK, I was really, really looking so unwell. So I told the directors that I'm not returning to Malawi. And they knew my situation anyway. They knew I wouldn't go to Malawi because I had nothing. I was just me. So I stayed behind. And then I went to live with a friend in Bradford. And I went to the GP for a normal registration. And that's when I found out I was HIV positive. Now I am living in somebody's house. This person, I've known them from Malawi, but we couldn't talk about HIV. At the same time, I had some lumps on my neck, which they were trying to investigate if I've got TB. So I had so many issues going on at the same time, and living in people's house and being scared of how are they going to take it. So I decided not to say anything. I decided not to tell them what I was going through. And then the GP referred me to an HIV clinic. They did all the biopsy and everything, found out I was HIV positive. And they said I had stayed with it for a long time. So I needed to start medication straight away. Normally, back in the day, people would stay for a little longer before they start taking my medication. But for me, I received the news on the same day. On the same day, I was sent to the pharmacy to get my medication. So they also found out I had TB. So I was taking loads of tablets every single day. Now, the people I was living with now found out that I was positive. They found my medication. They didn't give me a chance to explain or say anything. It was leave our house as soon as possible. So I left the house and I went to live with another person. Now I was going to a local church. So I had met people there. So I looked for one person that I knew from church. If she can look after me, she did. And then she got communicated from the other family, oh, she's HIV positive. Now I got chased from that house again. Now I went to a different one. Now I had to write on Facebook, I am homeless. I'm looking for somewhere to stay. So another lady who had young children, she needed some support. So she contacted me. She said, you can come and live with me. You help me with my children as well. So I went to live with them for a while. And then the other day I went out, I just found my medication on the table. What are these? And I couldn't deny my name was there. They were taken in my bags. And straight away, despite the fact that I was being called the best person ever, the nicest person ever, but as soon as they found my medication, leave our house as soon as possible. So this was like my life, moving from one house to the other, not because I was a bad person, not because I was misbehaving, but because I was HIV positive. And nobody dared to ask me, how did you get it? How did you end up here? It was all about, she's HIV positive, leave my house as soon as possible. Now I came to Manchester, I joined George Trust House, and I learned so much about myself. I learned so much about my body, and I received so much support that I could get. And here I am now. I am an asylum seeker. I live in Manchester. I am still with the Home Office. That's even an issue as well. And I am a mother of a premature child. And I am a Black woman living with HIV, facing all these kind of discriminations. And I thought I represent a lot of women going through something every single day. If I don't stand up and speak, if I don't stand up and encourage other people who are living with it, and also speak to people who are not living with it, to teach them about HIV, to teach them how it's transmitted, and to teach them how they can live with it in a healthy and normal life, then who am I? So I jumped in with George Trust House to do positive speaking. At the moment, my message, yes, is based on ending HIV stigma, but also to teach about you equals you. Because a lot of people, they still have the HIV of 1980. They've got no idea how HIV medication has improved, how people are living with it now without transmitting. I have a 6-year-old child now. She is negative. She was not born with it. And I'm the only one living with it. Of course, the dad tried to play some magic at some point, tried to accuse me of transmitting the virus to him, but he was just avoiding child maintenance. He didn't have HIV. George Trust House was there to support me. The doctors were there to support me, because we all know once you start taking HIV medication, you cannot transmit it to the next person. So this is the message we are trying to send out there. When you are found to be HIV positive, the doctors give you medication, follow what the doctor says, take your medication every single day. Now, after a few months, or after a few weeks, you start changing, your body starts changing, your immunity starts getting boosted, and then you become undetectable. So this is why we are saying you equals you. Undetectable is equal to untransmittable. So these days, people living with HIV can get married to someone who is not positive, and they cannot transmit the virus if they're taking medication. Women living with HIV, they can give birth to a child who is not HIV positive. So HIV is getting defeated step by step, and medication has been improved, and we're living a healthy life. Look at me. You cannot tell if you see me in the street that I was HIV positive, but I am. So this gives me a question of, why do we need to discriminate people living with it? And also, what do we want them to do? The HIV is in our system. It will never go away until medication is available. So why do we throw hate? Why do we throw stigma? We cannot transmit. That's me right there.
Thank you very much, Agatha.
That was...
Yeah. Sorry, go on, Anne-Marie, sorry.
Sorry. Thank you. I just wanted to say that was such a powerful story. Yeah, made me quite emotional. And thank you, Paul, about talking about George House Trust as well. That was brilliant. Thank you so much. I'll just hand it over to Steph now for any.
Hi, both of you. So obviously I would like to speak to Agatha after I've asked the questions, because I've got, I can relate to what Agatha talks about. So thank you for sharing that with us today. So obviously, Paul, like, so how easy is it for somebody to get access to a HIV test?
I mean, I'll start off talking about that. It's very easy. You can now get a test online. It's a very simple pinprick test. When I was diagnosed, you had to wait for a week. So these days it's much, much simpler. If you go to a sexual health clinic, they will offer you an HIV test. There's some community testing. So for example, in Manchester, the LGBT Foundation do tests. The Black Health Agency do tests in some community venues. Some GPs will do a test as well. And in some parts of Greater Manchester, we've been working with the health service. And now in some hospitals, everyone who goes to an accident and emergency department will, if they give blood, they will do an HIV testing as part of that. Because one of the things we're keen to do is identifying late diagnosis, because there will still be some people around who have no idea their HIV status, and they need to do that really. So it is relatively simple to get a test. And as Agatha was saying in the talk, nowadays everyone who's identified as positive will be started on treatment straight away. Some people used to wait 4 or 5 years because their health was fine, but the aim now is to make everyone undetectable as soon as possible to ensure that they can't transmit the virus to anybody. So again, I think we really encourage people, anyone who thinks they might be at risk, to have an HIV test, and also anyone who think might be at risk can get access to PrEP to prevent them becoming infected. So I don't know if Agatha wants to add anything to that around testing, really.
Yeah, it's the same as what Paul has said. And once you get tested and you're positive, apart from just taking medication, we get monitored as well. After every 6 months, they check us to see our liver functioning, our kidney functioning, and everything to make sure that the medication is working really well and we're not left behind health-wise. So myself, I've never been unwell with HIV, to be honest, for 13 years. There's nothing that I can say, oh, I ended up in a hospital because I'm HIV positive. No, I've never been unwell, and I have been really, really well. I even wish I could show you the pictures before and after, before I was diagnosed, because I was like a skeleton just covered with the skin. But now look at me, I am the healthiest. I've got calves. I've got, yeah, you know. So medication has really supported me. And also testing, I feel like a lot of people, they fear to go and get tested because the community is going to know about me. My friends are going to know about me. So I'll just ignore it and start living with it. Even if I have it, I don't want to know. But this is a different thing. Your immunity is getting suppressed. If you don't go and get tested, you're making it worse. But if you go and get tested, think about the community. What is the community going to do if you get so unwell and die because of it? The community will come with flowers on your tombstone and put. They'll walk away and drink, and they'll forget about you. How about you just be strong? How about you just ignore everyone and care about your life, care about yourself, go and get tested, and then whatever the results will come, be it negative, that's fine. Be it positive, that's fine. We are living with it.
Thank you. So we've talked a bit about, you know, the stigma of, like, you know, say you can't catch it from somebody who is HIV positive if they're on medication. So if somebody was in a relationship with HIV, who was HIV positive, and we didn't quite know that you couldn't catch it via someone who was HIV positive and they were taking medication, what protections could they take in order to protect themselves?
I mean, that's a really good question. I think for me, if you're single, if you're starting a relationship, it's always an issue about who do you tell, when do you tell people, really. And for me, I always use a condom, but that's to protect myself from other sexually transmitted diseases. There's lots of other diseases that you wouldn't want to catch. So actually, I'm really clear I'm undetectable. But there's still a lot of ignorance amongst the gay community. I chat to other gay men and they're not aware of U equals U, or they don't believe it. And I think it's important that people are really clear about that. But I think it is one of the things, if you're not in a relationship, it's always an issue about when do you tell people. And there's still people who don't believe U equals U, who are convinced about U equals U. So actually, it's quite a difficult area. I don't know if Agatha's experience of that, really actually telling people, can be quite difficult, can't it?
Yeah, I have. It's not just in physical, because I took a break after I gave birth to my daughter. I took a break from dating. I felt like I need to find myself. I need to know what I want, what my dreams are. And I didn't want any distractions, because obviously I've said my daughter was born premature. So I had a lot of things to organize about myself. So now I feel like I'm ready. I can date again. But with a busy life of going up and down, it's hard for me to bump into a guy who like me. So I decided to go on Tinder. So I want to take things now in my own terms. I want to be as honest as I can with my new relationship, because this is something I would like to enjoy. So I started disclosing my status to people that showed interest in me. We go for a date, we meet up, we eat. And I'm like, I'm HIV positive. The reaction is the same. Oh, you're such an amazing person. I like your personality. We are a match. We are what? As soon as I disclose my status, oh, this is too much for me. I understand that, because I would put myself in their situation. I would be really scared as well. But this is someone, not I just surprise them with news. I start from the word go, because I know I'll disclose my status, and I start teaching them about HIV right from the beginning of our conversation. I want them to understand. So they show interest of understanding. But when they realize now it's real, she is HIV positive, I become an enemy. They don't want to date me anymore. So here I am still looking, but every time I disclose, that's the end of it. Now, do I live in a lie? Do I start lying? No, I need people to accept me for who I am. And that's the message I'm sending out there. Like, there's nowhere we should still be throwing stigma in this age and in this time. Also, to add on the protection, Paul had mentioned that there's use of condoms. There's also PrEP, and there's also PEP. So when you talk about, I think, Paul, would you like to comment on the PrEP and PEP?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'll talk about, PEP historically is what if a nurse or a doctor had a needle stick injury, if people thought they were at risk, they give them PEP, which is like one of the HIV drugs, and that really prevents people becoming infected. But again, in terms of PrEP is available, it's only recently become available on the NHS in this country. And I think there's still issues about who's actually taking it up. It tends to be mainly gay men who used to buy it online before it was on the NHS. So particularly amongst women or some BME communities, it's actually quite harder to get people to actually access PrEP, because I suppose, the thing is, if you're wanting to get PrEP, people need to realize they might be at risk of contracting HIV. And the reality is anyone is at risk at all. If you have one unprotected sexual encounter, you can become infected. So it's really important that people are aware of PrEP and also PEP as well, really. And it links in with the whole issue of actually protecting everybody and being clear about revealing your status. I mean, you don't have to tell your GP you're HIV positive. We encourage people to do that. But in smaller communities, it might be hard to do that. The NHS isn't always wonderful around confidentiality. So there's issues around confidentiality, about making sure that if you do reveal your status, so that people are aware of that, needs to be treated really sensitively, I think.
So how about you ring a new job, you go into a new job, like, like on application forms, like, say, do you have any access needs, or do you have any additional needs? So do you have to disclose your HIV status to your employer, or are you in your rights to say, no, I don't want to disclose that information?
Again, a really good question. I mean, I consider myself, I identify as a disabled person, and I'm involved in the disability movement as well as the LGBT movement. But actually, you don't have to disclose your status. And we're covered under the equality legislation. So even if you're living with HIV and completely well, theoretically, you can't actually be discriminated against. And employers have to make what's called a reasonable adjustment. So, for example, a friend of mine was newly diagnosed and he started taking medication. one of the side effects of that was you can get really bad diarrhea. So he told his employer, and they temporarily relocated his desk so he was just near a toilet. So that was a really concrete, practical example of what you can do. But it has to be reasonable. If you're HIV positive and say, oh, I'm not coming into work, that's not reasonable. But actually, a lot of workplaces aren't aware of HIV. We supported a young man recently at George House Trust who was a 17-year-old gay man who found out he was positive. He worked in a small cafe and he told his manager in confidence that he was positive. She called all the other staff together when he wasn't there, told them about his status, told them he wouldn't be allowed to prepare food at all of which is completely illegal and also completely unnecessary. But again, I think a lot of HR departments don't have any awareness of HIV and the policies have really. So it's really important that employers know that you can't lose your job and you can't be denied services because of your HIV status.
Thank you, and that's really, it's been a really informative session today. Now, Agatha, I would just like to say directly to you that somebody who I myself have been, abused as a child, but not sexually, but mentally. I understand what courage and determination it really takes to share your powerful story with us today. And, to learn that, it isn't right that we're blamed because we're abused, like when you said, you were moving all of the houses because of people were aware of your medication without asking you how you contracted it. And, I appreciate anyone who has the courage to share that story. I will be sharing my story on a later live session. So it just really takes a lot of courage, and thank you for sharing that story. A lot of what you went through reminisced with me on a personal level as well. So thank you, Agatha.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much.
And
I just want to say I just wanted to say as well, we have had some positive feedback on our Facebook page as well, if I can just read them out.
Absolutely do.
Just bear with me. So people are saying thank you, well done. Also, wow, very powerful indeed. Thank you for sharing your story, and everything you said resonates with so many people. Also saying it's very courageous for you to come and share your story, and just people are saying great point and everyone's at risk. So thank you so much to both of you again. And thank you, Steph, for the question and answer session as well. Okay. I agree, it was a very informative session and very useful for raising awareness about HIV as well. So it's much appreciated. Thank you so much for coming along.
That's great. And just to say, it's really simple. If you want to refer anyone to George House Trust, you can go on a website and do it, or you can go to refer. And we are keen to run, if you're involved in any organisations in Bury or elsewhere, we're keen to talk to a wide range of organisations. In the past, I've run some trainings for some GP practices in Bury, and I'm going to be doing some more hopefully again soon. But we are keen to get the message about you equals you, about challenging stigma out to as many people as possible. So hopefully you say, just contact us. My email is just paul@ght.org.uk. So we're keen to run as many sessions as we can and just to sort of spread the message. So thanks very much for all your questions and for setting up the session and sort of listening to us. It's been great.
Okay.
Thank you again.
Thank you so much.
See you soon.
I would like to say, now that people have listened, this is what we want. You listen to the message and share it around, teach other people as well. Because I feel like the 1980 HIV message was just cut off and it's not continuing to spread. So we are here to teach, to spread the message. So when people hear the message, let's teach others as well. So we can teach as many people as we can about HIV.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You just saying that, Agatha, I was just because you know we had the Channel 4 program. It's
I think my network. I can't hear.
we had that program. It's the same. Do you feel that it was sort of a right representation of, you know, of the issue of HIV that AIDS sort of thing.
I think I didn't catch that. I think my internet was missing about. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. You said there was an issue. You wanted to ask me a question.
Yeah, so it was just about, you know, what your views on that It's a Sin program, you know, that was aired on Channel 4.
Yeah.
Do you think that was a good representation of, you know, the HIV of the 80s? Because that is when it first came about, and you know, and people weren't particularly aware of it then.
Yeah, I mean, I can talk. I mean, actually, Russell T. Davies, who wrote It's a Sin, is a friend of mine. And about 5 years ago, he took me to lunch to sort of pick my brains about what it was like in the 1980s. And actually, I think it is. So some of the stories I talked to him about feature in It's a Sin. And actually in episode 3, a guy called Nathaniel Hall, who's one of our positive speakers, is also an actor. And he appears in episode 3 as Ollie Mears' boyfriend. But also he's a good example. He was a gay man who was diagnosed when he was 16, the very first relationship he had. And he's written a play about that called First Time, which is about his own experience. So that's been shown in lots of places. But I think It's a Sin is quite accurate around, because I was very much around in the early 1980s. And I think it's been really helpful. It's put HIV back on the agenda again. It led to a big increase in testing. So I think we need a whole range of programs that talk about the widest experience of HIV. And I think it's great in terms of our positive speakers. We've got a couple of heterosexual men, we've got some African men and women, we've got some white women, we've got a real mixture of speakers, because I think the diversity of our voices needs to be heard all the time, really.
Thank you.
Thanks, great, thank you all. Okay.
Thanks again, everyone.
See you soon.
Thank you.
See you. Bye.
Bye for now.
Bye.